Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm WWII and in today's video I will be reviewing the FV4003 CENTURION MK.5 AVRE, which is of course the tank that you will get on purchase of the Ultimate Season Pass for the brand new Valiant season. This is a tier 10 British medium tank inside the World War II game mode, and it's only medium tank by name, not by its nature, as it has a 165mm derp gun originally intended for taking out bunkers and buildings, and of course in the game you're going to be shooting people and dealing a hefty amount of damage with this giant caliber gun on a medium tank. In this video I'm going to be going over all of the stats of the Centurion AVRE. I'm going to be comparing it to tank destroyers, as that is the best comparison that I can find at tier 10 inside the World War II game mode to compare this tank to. I'll tell you my commander and equipment setup. We'll go over the armor viewer of this tank and see how strong the armor is with this Centurion hull and this plow on the front which acts as spaced armor. And then we're going to talk a little bit about my commander and equipment setup and then get stuck into some gameplay. Before I tell you how to get your hands on this tank and all of the stats of this tank and give it a review, I'd like to say thank you very much to everyone for your patience whilst I've been away for a couple of weeks, dealing with some issues on my girlfriend's, with my girlfriend's family. Unfortunately, her stepdad and her mother are sort of chronically ill, not very well at all. Her stepdad went into hospital. We've been dealing with helping them with shopping and etc., dog sitting, things like that. So I haven't been able to play the game, but they are recovering slowly, getting better, and I'm able to play the game a little bit more now and get some content out for you. So thank you very much to everyone for your support during this time and for being very patient, and thank you all so much to all of the new subs out there for helping me get towards those milestones and keeping the channel going. And yeah, the content will hopefully be flowing nice and steadily from now on. But here is the review of the Centurion AVRE. Here's the picture of the tank itself. As you can see, Centurion hull, that's no plow on the front, which like I said acts as spaced armor. And yeah, we'll have to see how the armor profile is in just a bit. But how do you get your hands on this tank? Well, as it's the Ultimate Season Pass tank, you buy the Ultimate Season Pass. And how much is that, you might ask? It's 6,000 gold in the store. So 6,000 gold alone for a tier 10 premium tank would be a very good price, unless the tank was absolutely terrible. This one definitely isn't terrible. It's very, very dangerous indeed. And of course, if you pay that, you get all of the other benefits of this season. So a pretty good deal. It does have a skin if you wanted to get the skin for this tank. This is the skin here. You can buy it in the appearances tab for 3,000 gold if you don't play Cold War. But if you do play Cold War, there is this pack here, which is the Season Pass tank, or the Valiant skin pack for the Valiant season. This is 3,900 gold, so 900 more gold than getting just one of the skins on their own, and you get the skin for the Cold War Valiant tank, the CATTB Thumper, which I'll be putting out a review as soon as I get some gameplay in it. So if you play Cold War, probably a no-brainer to get the skin pack. But we're going to go now over to the Excel spreadsheet, and I've got all of the stats of the Centurion AVRE here on the left. And in today's video, we're going to be comparing this tank to the FV4005, the FV215B183, otherwise known as the Death Star, and the Sturm Tiger, because all three of these tank destroyers have high caliber guns like the Centurion AVRE, and they have very useful premium HESH and HE rounds, and they're very derpy in their nature with high output damage. And I think this is the best comparison for the Centurion AVRE. To anyone that hasn't seen my tank on tank comparison here in Excel, green's the best stat, red's the worst, and orange is somewhere in between. And the ones highlighted in yellow is with my commander and equipment setup applied and I'll tell you how I got to those figures in just a little bit. It's not going to be a typical comparison, as the other three tanks or tank destroyers are tank destroyers in this comparison, and because the Centurion AVRE only has two types of ammunition, well, one type of ammunition with two different flavours, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I'll hopefully explain everything as best as possible so you get a good understanding of the Centurion AVRE. We're going to now start with the Centurion AVRE and the hit points, 2100 for a tier 10 medium tank. Not quite as good as something like the Sturm Tiger, which has 2200, but it is better than the FV4005 and the Death Star by a little bit, and for a tier 10 medium tank that's fairly reasonable. However, with so many of these tanks on the battlefield at the moment, you're going to be losing over half your health if you get penetrated, which is very easy to do against this tank, as the armour profile from the side isn't particularly great at all, and we'll talk you through that when we get to the armour viewer. So at the moment, you might only be lasting between 2 and 3 shots, depending on if you get penetrated or not. However, in normal gameplay, that's enough to take between 3 and 5 rounds and get you through the game. One thing to note about this comparison is that all three tank destroyers in this comparison do not have a fully traversable turret. The FV4005 can move it approximately, I think it's 90 degrees to the right and the left. The Death Star a little bit less, and the Sturm Tiger doesn't have a turret at all. It just has a gun that can traverse a little bit to the left and right. So that's one big benefit of the Centurion AVRE, is that you have a fully traversable turret as you are a medium tank. Next, we're going to get on to the view range. 400 meters base view range is very nice indeed, and it's the best in this comparison. You can get this to a very good level indeed if you use things like combat ration, situational awareness, and you run the advanced optics. I don't have a great figure even with my fully pimped out command and equipment setup, and I'll tell you why that is in just a little bit. But do note that you can get this well above 500 meters view range and have the ability to spot very well for yourself. Next, we're going to get on to the mobility of the Centurion AVRE, and you'd expect it to have good mobility as it's a medium tank, but it is a little bit hit and miss, as you can see from the colours here. A little bit of red, a little bit of green, and one stat which is orange. As a medium tank that has a massive gun and some spaced armour, this will drag it down, and Centurions aren't known for having great engine power. They just have a relatively okay top speed. So the engine power, as you can see, 695 horsepower on the Centurion AVRE, is the worst in this comparison by some way, which means that it also has the worst power to weight in this comparison. And as a medium tank, that does mean that you can struggle. Of course, you can boost that up with the mobility equipment, but due to the derpy nature of the gun, I highly recommend you don't do that. You do have the best top forward and reverse speed at 48 and 16 kilometers an hour respectively. Your hull traverse isn't great for a medium tank at 30 degrees a second, only a little bit worse than the Death Star, but you do have a fully traversable turret to account for that. And the turret traverse is a respectable 36 degrees a second, the best in this comparison by some way, and with gun handling skills, as you can see here, that does move up by quite some way. So not the absolute best mobility. You do struggle going up hills, you struggle getting up to that top forward speed, but you do have fairly okay traverse speed, especially on the gun, to be able to get your gun around people that might be trying to circle you or just get around you. Next, we're going to get on to the guns that all of these tanks and tank destroyers have. As we mentioned at the start of today's video, the Centurion AVRE has a 165mm gun that only has two different shells. It has a standard HESH round and a premium HESH round, and I'll tell you which way round they are in just a little bit. In terms of the other guns in this comparison, the Death Star and the FV4005 have that famous 183mm caliber gun, and the Sturm Tiger has that ginormous 38cm or 380mm Doom cannon on that tank. The only other tank that I can think of that comes close to this are either SPGs or artillery, or the Jagdpanzer E100, which has a 170mm caliber gun, I believe, or a 17cm gun as it's designated in the game, so high alpha damage, and this is a good comparison for the Centurion AVRE. Now, you might notice, to those of you that have played the tank or seen the stats of this tank, I've put the ammunition which costs the most, which is the one with the most penetration but less alpha damage, first. This is not how it will appear in the game, but I think it's best for the purposes of this comparison, as the Death Star, FV4005 and Sturm Tiger do have standard rounds in the form of AP and heat rounds on the Sturm Tiger, so I think it's best that we discount the first shell, which is AP on the Death Star and FV4005, and heat on the Sturm Tiger, and we'll get stuck into the HESH rounds on the AVRE. So on the AVRE, you do have these HESH rounds here, which have 240mm of penetration for 1100 alpha damage. These are your premium rounds. These are the rounds that you will have to select when you get into a game. The round that will automatically start reloading is this round here. This is your standard round, 185mm of penetration for 1400 alpha damage. So just to make that clear, the ones in the bottom here on shell type 3 are your standard rounds, the cheapest round, and your more expensive round are these ones here, 240mm for 1100 alpha damage. The reason I put them round this way for this particular comparison is because of, on these TDs, they have a premium HESH and an HE option, and it's the best for this comparison. And the 165mm on the AVRE does not have a standard AP or heat round, it just has two flavors of HESH. So I hope that makes it clear to you. So let's have a look at the rounds that have 1100 alpha damage with 240mm of penetration. These are the premium HESH rounds on the Centurion AVRE, which is a little bit weird to think that premium rounds have less alpha damage but more penetration. Probably the way that it should be. Let's compare that to the rounds or the premium HESH on the Death Star and the FV4005, which have the exact same gun, and the premium HE on the Sturm Tiger. Well, as you can see, these rounds have 685 meters a second shell velocity. This isn't the worst in this comparison. That goes to the 465 meters a second on the premium HE on the Sturm Tiger, but it's not quite as good as the 830 meters a second on the premium HESH on the Death Star and the FV4005. Next, we'll have a look at the penetration, and as you can see, highlighted in green means it's the joint best in this comparison, 240mm of penetration, the same as on the Death Star and the FV4005, much better than the 115mm of penetration on the Sturm Tiger. In terms of alpha damage, it's the lowest in this comparison, but it is the lowest caliber gun, which does make sense at 1100. The premium HESH on the Death Star and the FV4005 is 1450, and the premium HE on the Sturm Tiger is 1700 damage. So yeah, a very, very scary HE round on that tank indeed. But for a medium tank, it's a massive caliber gun, isn't it? And this has 4.95 blast radius, which is a very large blast radius, even for a 165mm caliber gun. It's only a little bit behind the 5.05 meters blast radius on the premium HESH on the Death Star and the FV4005, but nothing compared to the 12.87 meters shell or blast radius on the Sturm Tiger's premium HE. But this means you're going to be splashing multiple tanks at once occasionally if you shoot between them, and you'll be dealing a fairly hefty amount of splash damage depending on the armor thickness that you are shooting at. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. Next, we're going to go on to the other HESH rounds, or the HESH rounds which are the cheapest and the round that will reload first. These are the 185mm of pen for your 1400 alpha damage. These are the cheapest round. They have the same blast radius at 4.95 meters. They also have 570 meters a second shell velocity, so a little bit slower than the premium rounds. In terms of the comparison to the other tanks, not quite as good as the Death Star and FV4005, which have 830 meters a second, but it beats the HE rounds on the Sturm Tiger, which have 465 meters a second shell velocity. So that's not too bad for the Centurion AVRE. You just have to give plenty of lead, and it does take a bit of time to pick it up. In terms of penetration, 185 millimeters. It's the best in this comparison, but it's to be expected as the other HE rounds in this comparison are the third ammunition selection on the tank destroyers. It's just the way that this comparison is going to have to work. It beats the HE on the Death Star and FV4005 and Sturm Tiger by some way. In terms of alpha damage, however, it is the worst in this comparison, 1400. Not quite as good as the 1650 on the Death Star and FV4005, which was nerfed some time ago, and it's not as good as the best in this comparison, which is the 1700 alpha damage on the Sturm Tiger. And again, that 4.95 meters blast radius, it's not as good as the Death Star and the FV4005, but only by a little bit, so a very nice blast radius, and yeah, some way behind the blast radius on the Sturm Tiger, but that's to be expected due to that 380mm or 38cm caliber derp gun on the Sturm Tiger. So what can you take home from this is that the shell velocity will take some getting used to. Penetration is very low, and you only have those two ammunition choices. You do not have a AP or APCR or heat round that you can fire with better penetration, better shell velocity. You are going to have to make these penetration figures work, and it can be very difficult, especially against super heavy tanks at tier 10, and I'll tell you how I get around that in the gameplay. However, you do have beautiful alpha damage for a medium tank at 1100 and 1400 meters, 1400 damage respectively, and you have a very nice blast radius. So it's comparable to a tank destroyer on a medium tank hull with a fully traversable turret. And it's starting to become a very dangerous tank, isn't it? You have 2,100 hit points and that 400 meters view range, which you can move up. And although you don't have great engine power, you have decent top speed and you do have fairly decent traverse speeds. So now we're going to get on into the gun handling and DPM, and this is where it might be quite interesting for some of you to see how this massive 165mm caliber gun holds up in comparison to the tank destroyers in this comparison. So the aim time on this 165mm caliber gun on the Centurion AVRE is 2.5 seconds. That's the best in this comparison. Not too bad for a derp gun and a gun caliber of that size. Beats the Death Star, FV4005 and the Sturm Tiger. In terms of the accuracy, you'd expect it probably to be the best due to the fact it's a medium tank and it's the lowest caliber gun in this comparison. But it's not quite as good as the 0.38 accuracy on the FV4005, and it is only slightly better than the Death Star's 0.4, but it does beat the Sturm Tiger's 0.43. In terms of the rate of fire, it's 2.31 rounds a minute. And this means that you have a 26-second base reload for either 1100 or 1400 alpha damage, depending what you are shooting. So here I've got the DPM of the standard, premium and third ammunition selections on these tanks, and this is where it's the right way around. Obviously here we did it differently for the comparison, but here we have the standard round, which is the round which has 240 millimeters of penetration, and it has 185 millimeters penetration and 1400 alpha damage here. And this premium round here is the one with 240 millimeters of penetration and 1100 alpha damage. And of course the third round, it doesn't have one, it only has those two ammunition choices. So let's see what the DPM is like compared to the tank destroyers in this comparison. So if you're firing the standard round on the Centurion AVRE, which again is the 185mm 1400 alpha damage shell, your base DPM, if you penetrate, is 3234 damage per minute. And if you use the premium rounds, which have the 1100 alpha damage, 240 millimeters of penetration, that's 2541 DPM. So If you run standard rounds on all of these tanks, you're going to be getting the best DPM with the Centurion AVRE, but bear in mind, the Death Star FV4005 have AP rounds, and the heat on the Sturm Tiger is its first ammunition selection as well. If you're running premium rounds on all of these tanks, you can see that the DPM drops dramatically to 2,541 on the Centurion AVRE, and that's the worst in this comparison. You do have to bear in mind as well that the penetration figures are terrible on the Centurion AVRE, whereas on the tank destroyers in this comparison, they have a first ammunition or a standard ammunition selection with decent penetration, 310mm on the AP for the Death Star and FV4005, and it has 280mm of heat penetration for the Sturm Tiger, so that's definitely something to think about. And of course, that third ammunition selection is blank. If you penetrate, the best DPM goes to the Death Star FV4005 at 3,300, and a little bit behind is the HE rounds on the Sturm Tiger, 3,298 DPM. So now, how many rounds does it have? 40 rounds of ammunition, which is the best in this comparison by some way, and due to the fact that you do have a better rate of fire, you're going to be getting through these rounds slightly more than you would in a tank destroyer, and maybe due to the mobility and playstyle and the gun depression, which is 10 degrees but only over the side, and I'll show you that during the gameplay. It maybe is a good case for playing this tank slightly more aggressive than the tank destroyers. In terms of the gun elevation, it's 20 degrees, which not quite as good as the 85 degrees of gun elevation on the Sturm Tiger, but that's a very unique case. It's better than the Death Star and the FV4005, so 10 degrees of gun depression and 20 degrees of gun elevation on the Centurion AVRE. Pretty good to use. I wish the 10 degrees of gun depression was over the front. Unfortunately, it's not. It's only over the side, so that's definitely something to think about. It's only 1 degree over the front, which can become extremely frustrating, meaning you have to turn to your side and expose more of the side of your tank than you'd wish on a ridgeline. And you'll see how frustrating that can be in the gameplay. But now we're going to have a look at my commander and equipment setup and how that affects the stats of the Centurion AVRE. So in terms of equipment, I have chosen to run improved ventilation, advanced loader, and advanced gun laying drive. I'm not using advanced optics, which is something that I occasionally switch out to if I want to be able to spot for myself. With my setup, you're not going to be able to outspot many people at all, and you're going to struggle to spot for yourself, but I play it more like a support tank, close up to account for the shell velocity, try and get the most out of the penetration, and play it like a support tank destroyer that plays very aggressively, as you'll see in the gameplay. However, if you wanted to be able to spot for yourself, I would say the best thing would be to maybe take out the advanced gun laying drive, as the aim time isn't the worst in the world, and put advanced optics in there to work with situational awareness on your commander. Speaking of commander skills, what do I run on the Centurion AVRE? Well, I run 6th Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Situational Awareness, and Off-Road Driving. So I'm trying to get every bit of DPM out of the tank that I can, every bit of gun handling out of the tank that I can, boosting my view range a little bit with the situational awareness, and trying to help that poor engine power and power to weight ratio with the off-road driving, which gives you a 15% increase to handling on soft terrain and a 7.5% increase to handling on moderately soft terrain. So how does that affect the stats of the Centurion AVRE? Well, it boosts your view range to 476 meters. Not very good. If you did choose to run the advanced optics instead of the gun laying drive, you'll be looking at above 500 meters view range, which would allow you to spot for yourself. In terms of the mobility, the only thing that's changed is the turret traverse. Due to the gun handling skills, that's gone up to 44.85 degrees a second. So yeah, every little helps in that regard. In terms of the aim time, I now have an aim time of 1.99 seconds and a sub 2 second aim time for a 165mm caliber gun maybe is a little bit overkill, and for most players I would probably suggest, like I've just said, take off the gun laying drive, use advanced optics, and have the ability to spot for yourself. I now have an accuracy of 0.33, which is pretty good for a 165mm caliber gun. It can be a bit derpy if you don't let it aim in fully, which is why I prefer that better aim time. But it is to pick your poison, you do have to make some sacrifices. In terms of the rate of fire, it's now gone up to 3.25. I now reload in 18.49 seconds. And the DPM, if I choose to run the rounds which have 1400 alpha damage with 185mm of penetration, is 4550. But of course, that's only if you penetrate every round, and you probably won't do. You're going to be doing lots of splash damage as well. And your DPM, if you were to run the premium rounds which have 240mm of penetration but only 1100 alpha damage, would be 3575. So you can see there you do have to make some sacrifices. You have to pick your setup to the way that you play. This is how I play. I recommend running the advanced optics as well to get your view range up and just aiming in for a little bit longer, especially if you like to play a slightly more passive style gameplay. But that's it for the raw stats and the commander and equipment setup of the Centurion AVRE. We're going to jump into the garage, have a look at the armor profile of the Centurion AVRE, and then we are going to get stuck into the gameplay. So I'll see you over in the garage in a second. So we're now in the garage having a look at the armor viewer of the Centurion AVRE, and unfortunately we don't have the luxury of using tanks.gg, as this is only on World of Tanks console. I believe this tank is in War Thunder, but for the purposes of this video we're going to have to make do with the armor viewer in the garage and have a look at the gameplay to see how the armor really holds up during the gameplay. So as you can see here, you do have that plow on the front which acts as spaced armor, and you also have that Centurion hull, so we're going to see how the thickness of that holds up. So the thickest part of the armor is this around the mantlet. In typical Centurion fashion, a relatively decent turret, especially when you are hull down. You are going to bounce some shells off of that, and even though you only have 1 degree of gun depression over the front, even if you are looking at this thing and it's slightly hull down, you will ricochet, and you only have that cupola to shoot at. But high penetration rounds, if you avoid the spaced armor, should probably butter through this, especially from a tier 10 or tier 9 or 10 tank destroyer, and maybe even some tier 8 tank destroyers as well. To the left and right of the gun, it's 235mm of base thickness, and these parts here, which are sloped back, 177mm. If you hit this when this is hull down at this angle, it might be, or it will most likely be, an auto ricochet angle, but from the side it will be flat and a nice easy penetration for you to shoot. Then of course you do have parts of the armor behind the spaced mantlet as well. And then you have the upper hull, which is 120mm of armor, and that is pretty poor, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending whether you're facing this thing or you're playing it, it's behind that plow at the front. So you can aim for this and go through with AP and APCR rounds. Heat will struggle to go through this unless it's exceptionally high, and even then it might be absorbed, and HE will just be absorbed by the plow. So definitely take that into account. You can always try and angle the front of this tank if you're facing someone and they're trying to shoot you, and get them to either hit your tracks or hit your plow and it get absorbed by the front. So that's the best option there for you to choose. The side of the armor on the turret here is 88mm thick, so you can go through the side of this tank in certain areas with the Centurion AVRE's HE penetration or HESH penetration, so definitely be warned for that. The lower plate is 76mm of armor, which is pretty terrible, but you do have spaced armor over the front of it. There's a little gap at the bottom right in the middle that you should be able to penetrate where the spaced armor isn't, and we'll look where the spaced armor is in just a second. The gun itself is 70mm of spaced armor, and if you hit it, you're just going to be damaging the gun. The side armor on the Centurion AVRE is actually really very nice. You're only going to be overmatched at the side if tanks are shooting at you with 151mm or more in terms of their gun caliber, but you can see at the back of this tank that 15mm section goes up into a bit which is above the tracks, and if you're able to penetrate this thing when it's showing you its side or its side scraping, you will be able to penetrate the rear engine deck of this tank and go through with HE and especially the HESH rounds on the Centurion AVRE, and that's a great spot to shoot at this tank. Here's the spaced armour underneath on the lower plate at 40mm, and if you shoot the parts that aren't covered by spaced armour, you should be able to go through this lower plate nice and easily indeed, as it was only 76mm, wasn't it, I believe. The rear of this tank, very easy penetration at 38mm of thickness on that, and the plough itself, the first part of the plough that covers the upper hull and a little bit of the upper lower plate I should say, is 30mm thick. This is quite thick for a plough, and it's going to be absorbing a lot of heat rounds and reducing the amount of damage that you take from HE rounds to almost zero in some cases, depending on the gun caliber that is shooting at you. If you're able to get above this and shoot the top of the turret or this section behind the cupola, you're going to be able to overmatch that with even sort of medium caliber guns of 90mm or more, so that's definitely something to watch out for. The tracks themselves are 20mm, covered by a side skirt which is 20mm of thickness, so definitely watch out for that. If you're shooting it with HE or heat, it's most likely going to be absorbed. And the only other thing to know about this tank is that the cupola, which I have probably skipped on, is here 88mm of thickness. This is going to be able to be visible from most angles, especially if you're shooting at it from the side and it's using 10 degrees of its gun depression. You can still go through this, and that will be an easy penetration, and you can penetrate the cupola 88mm with the Centurion AVRE's standard or its premium HESH ammunition selection. So yeah, definitely watch out for that, but it's more of a tank that you have to get a feel of. You have to watch some gameplay in it to see how the armor works. It does absorb and bounce and ricochet some shells, which you don't expect it to for a medium tank, but it's definitely not infallible, and you will be shot through the front of the turret and penetrated, shot into the cupola. And when you're on ridge lines and you can't use that 1 degree of gun depression over the front, you have to turn to your side, use the 10 degrees, and you're exposing your front drive rail, the side of your tank, and rounds which aren't heat or HE will go through you very, very easily indeed. And if people get the rear of your tank, you're in easy penetration. So that's it for the armor of the Centurion AVRE. Let's get stuck into the first of the gameplays. So you're joining me here in the first gameplay. We're on Raseiniai in a standard battle, and we're heading towards the little castle location, which is situated towards the central and the southwestern part of the map. Most of our team have gone down the 9-0 line. I kind of already went this position if I really wanted to, and I was playing super seriously and super tight. I would turn around and just head back and defend the capture circle from the bottom portion of where the teammates have gone. But I'm going to continue trudging my way. As you can see, the engine power is horrendous, very slowly, up to this castle location and try and defend it from this position. And we're going to hopefully get some side shots into tanks that are crossing into the central location. And we're just going to be testing this gun out. This was one of the very first games I played in this tank. And the first shot in this gameplay loops a little bit low with the slow shell velocity. And we do a pretty hefty amount of damage, 549 damage with the splash rounds. With the splash damage there on these rounds. I'm firing the rounds that have 1400 alpha damage, but they have the 185mm of penetration. I don't run the advanced reload skill, which is something that you could run, or a lot of people find it that you should run it on this tank to switch out the shells without any time penalty at all, depending on what you're shooting at. I just prefer to play it this way and invest into the DPM and gun handling, and I mainly just run the premium HESH rounds. If you wanted to play it super competitively, then you definitely could run the advanced reload, and you'd have to take off maybe the advanced loader or the improved ventilation and run it with the advanced optics as well. But you saw we got a lovely juicy penetration on that object 2790 from distance. When things are turning against you and they're giving you their sides in the rear, this is when this tank really can shine. You can see it's awkward in this location on this ridgeline. No gun depression over the front. We do have to turn our tank to the side to get that 10 degrees of gun depression. And these first sort of 2 to 3 gameplays are going to be showing you average games that I was having in this tank. You get some nice penetration, some derpy shots like that when you don't let it fully aim in, and it can be a little bit frustrating. You're going to see the good and the bad of this tank in this sort of gameplay section. And although these are kind of average games that I was having in this tank, they're definitely not bad games at all. When a tank like this with its tracks is facing you, the best part is to go through the engine deck. I shot towards the upper part of the rear of the M103 and we penetrated and set him on fire. You'll find that you do set tanks on fire very, very often in this tank due to the higher gun caliber nature, and you damage a lot of modules and get some nice ammo racks as well. Went for a rear shot into that enemy Centurion AVRE there. Tried to get a penetrating shot. We only tracked him and dealt a fairly substantial amount of damage. And I'm just trying to stay in this position for as long as possible. But at this point I had given up. I've defended this location for long enough, and hopefully it'll give my team enough time to push around the northern part and hopefully win this game. So very quick game there, showing you that you can pick up a very nice amount of damage very quickly indeed. We're going to skip forward to the end and see how we did. So here we are at the end of that game. Unfortunately, our team capitulated there, but we still picked up a nice combined amount of damage in a very, very quick game indeed. We finished top of our team with a profit with a premium or without a premium account, 4.2k direct damage, 1.2k assistance, and we blocked 320, showing you this tank can do a little bit of everything, and it's very devastating indeed. That was a 6 minutes 38 second battle, and we died, within 3 minutes, 4 minutes of that. So yeah, this thing's going to be doing a lot of damage indeed. So that's it for the first game there. We're now going to head on into the second one. So you're joining me 30 seconds into the second battle. We're here on Sand River in the Centurion AVRE, and we are coming to this central location. It's a standard battle, and we're going to try and get some view range out as the enemy tanks head towards their camping or sniping spots, I should say, in F1, 2 and G1 and 2. Have to turn our tank right to the side to get the full extent of our 10 degrees of gun depression, which means that whilst I was fanning around trying to get into position, we did miss the chance to get a shot there on that tortoise. So we're now going to lie in wait for our next victim. There's tons of enemy Centurion AVREs as well as them on my team, and that's going to be the case for a while, as this is still a new plaything for all of the player base. We've now turned our attentions to this Concept 1B, and we're just going to have to give plenty of lead. It penetrates right through the side and we get 1581 damage to start off this video. I'm trying to go backwards and forwards and use the ridge lines in front of me to protect me and try and stop the shell trajectory of the enemy artillery, and unfortunately it doesn't work. We get punished for our sins there, and we take a big old slap from the T92, I believe it was. I sarcastically flag good game. I must have been having a little bit of a hissy fit, but we're gonna just get calm and relocate and see if we can defend the capture circle from the north and from the south, because it looks like we're kind of pinned back here at the base. We're gonna try and get out of this position as quickly as possible, try not to get spotted. I'm constantly looking at the mini-map for where I might be spotted from. We saw that the Concept 1B was last spotted in that location, and I thought, why the hell not? Let's just fire a shot on the move with this very derpy 165mm caliber gun. And we either splashed or we penetrated and killed that Concept 1B, which means we two-shot that Concept 1B. And from having a kind of mixed start, we're up to 2.2k direct damage, and we're not having too bad of a game in reality. There are two heavy tanks pushing from the north now in the form of the VZ55 and the T57 Heavy, I believe it is. So again, constantly looking at the minimap, trying to find positions where I feel like I have the best chance of being able to fire without getting spotted, because when you are spotted in this thing, if you're caught out in the open, you don't have great armor from the side and from the rear, you're going to get penetrated, and considering there's so many Centurion AVREs around on the battlefield, you definitely don't want to get caught with your pants down, because you'll lose your hit points very quickly indeed, and you don't have the mobility to get out of position like a typical medium tank would. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find a position where I'm kind of able to shoot any kind of enemy advance, where I have some hard cover and I'm able to get off of this ridge line if I do get spotted. And we're going to try and play this mid to long range tank destroyer slash artillery kind of gameplay. If we have to splash and we can't pen, we're just going to have to chip away by splashing the enemy tanks, and that's one way to play tanks that have these derpy guns, is just to splash your way through the enemies if they have thick armor. And when a lightly armored tank comes up, we're going to have to try and make sure we penetrate. Unfortunately, we do get spotted, so we're going to fall further back to a ridgeline where we can hopefully stop this advance from the north from those two heavy tanks, and maybe try and get a little bit of high ground to loop shells in on them. It doesn't take many shots, as you can see, to get a reasonable amount of damage. This tank seems like it picks up kills in almost every game you come up with it. You're either one shot in a tank, or you're setting them on fire, or you're splashing them and taking them out. So it's a very good tank for doing things like defending capture circles, whittling down enemy heavy tanks where your teammates aren't penetrating them, and playing this kind of tank destroyer slash artillery gameplay with a medium tank kind of mobility. If I had the advanced optics and I chose to boost that up, I could go forward, spot for myself, be a little bit more aggressive, but this is the perfect kind of gun handling I want for these longer range engagements, where I don't have the hit points to go forward and take any more shots at the moment. I'm going to have to just try and defend this location and use the vision that my teammates are giving me. And we're just going to have to be patient, and when you've lost as many hit points as I have at the start of this game, you're going to have to play this kind of patient gameplay. I don't like playing this, it gets a little bit boring. I like to be a little bit more aggressive usually, and getting into the positions where I'm able to get up close and personal, use the penetration that this tank has, and try and utilize the poor penetration and also negate that poor shell velocity. But we were patient and we were rewarded there with a nice penetration at distance, taking our damage total up to 4.3k damage. And now we notice this heavy tank is struggling against this UDES 1516, and if I aimed, I most likely would have penetrated. Unfortunately, I was being lazy here. I was obviously having a little bit of a tough session because I'm not playing absolutely perfectly tight, but we're still having a fairly decent result nonetheless, and it just goes to show what this tank is capable of. I believe I heard the UDES 1516 fire, so we took our chance to go round and we managed to finish him off, and it didn't matter where we hit him there, we just had to splash him. You're going to be dealing anywhere between 250 to 600 splash depending on what thickness of armor you are shooting at. The thinner the armor, the more splash damage you are going to be doing. That's why sometimes it's advisable maybe to splash underneath heavy tanks, go underneath their lower plate, things like that, and splash their underside, and you're more likely to do more damage. But unfortunately for us, our teammates were collapsing just like I was, a bit too fast for us to defend, and now it's just this lonely tortoise who has to take on 9 enemy teammates, which of course in that position is basically impossible for him to do so. So unfortunately, yeah, it's another defeat. We still have a fairly good damage total in this defeat of 5.3k direct damage with 2 kills, and we still make a profit with a premium account. However, without one we would have lost a little bit of silver in that game. So we're now going to head on into the third game and see if we can take these defeats and push them into wins. So you're joining me again 30 seconds into the battle. I'm trying to cut out a little bit of the starts of these battles because it literally is just me very slowly getting into position. And you can see the very poor mobility for a medium tank. But you obviously carry this massive threat. So when you get to your position, it can be very deadly indeed. Aggressive players like this out in the open are a risk that sometimes you have to take. You can boost the mobility up by a little bit, but for me it's not worth it. And when you improve the firepower, you were able to do things like that as a Death Star, thinking I've got a bigger caliber gun, I'm a big boy tier 10 tank destroyer, I'm going to come over and take you out. No, you're not. I'm able to go through your lower plate at that angle, and we penetrate, set him on fire, and he subsequently gets taken out by our friendlies who are backing us up behind us. And to start this game, which I believe was my first game in this tank, we're up to 1.5k direct damage already, 479 assistance, and yeah, it's started off pretty well. We've got to this position which I wanted to get to in D6 or C6, trying to get view range out along the A line, trying to spot tanks getting into the north of the map. I'm keeping an eye on that T57 heavy because I have a feeling he might be coming around after me at some point. And for now I'm trying to use the hard cover of this Death Star to the left of me and try and get side shots on the tanks that are on the hill. Due to the gun depression of 1 degree over the front, again I'm having to turn all the way around to the side to get 10 degrees, which means I'm exposing more of my tank than I wish. And I think now is the time. This is probably either my game over or I'm going to be severely crippled for the rest of this battle. So we're going to take our time, aim at the back engine deck of the T57 Heavy. We manage to penetrate. We do low roll by a tiny little bit. And yeah, that's why I mainly run the Hesh with the lower pen but the more alpha damage. I don't bother with the advanced reload because the penetration upgrade isn't enough for me to warrant doing that. I'd rather have the gun handling, so I'm able to put a massive shot into that poor T57 Heavy and then subsequently take out the little tiny Vanguard with this big 165mm caliber gun. The gun is almost as big as your tank, mate. Go by to the garage. And yeah, we've had a very, very nice impact in this game, and it was at this point I sort of sat back whilst my gun's repairing, and I'm thinking, wow, this is a pretty dirty tank. This is going to be pretty dangerous on the battlefield. I don't know how this is going to go, and it appears that yes, it's being played exceptionally well by the player base. There's tons of them around. It's very popular and it's very dirty indeed. We're now going to try and finish this game strong. Maybe we can push our damage total up by a little bit more. We'll get another kill. We repaired our gun now, and we're just waiting, lying in ambush. I probably should be a little bit more aggressive at this current point in time. I might try and get a shell and loop it over that ridgeline to splash and kill that T28 prototype. I think I was just seeing if it would loop and what the shell velocity was like on this tank. I'm never going to know whether I would have hit that T28 prototype there, as he does get taken out by our friendly or another friendly Centurion AVRE. Now there's just 3 tanks left on the enemy team, and I'm going to try my best to go forward and get as much damage as I can. We're going to give a nice amount of lead, and even for me, I'm still trying to practice the lead with this tank. It's a very slow shell velocity, and if you play Cold War with the high shell velocity on many of the tanks, it will take a little bit of getting used to, so it's definitely something to bear in mind. And you can see there when you go into sniper and you accidentally start moving forwards, you really do screw up your gun depression, so it can be very frustrating, but it can also be extremely deadly. And now it's just the enemy artillery left. We're going to see if we're able to get a shell. I'm just going to auto aim and see if I'm able to loop a shell over the ridge, which is something you can do with these big derpy guns. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to add to our good start, but we had a good impact. We took out a tier 10 tank destroyer, took out a tier 8 light tank with extremely good concealment. We got a kill, a little bit of a profit. That's only a 3rd class. We finished 3rd on our team. with 3.2k direct damage and 2.3k assistance, and we also blocked 320 damage. So that's it for the third game. We're now going to head on into the fourth and final game. So you now join me in the fourth and final gameplay of today's video on the Centurion AVRE. We're on Fisherman's Bay in a standard battle, and as you can see, pretty much all of our team are camped in the northwest portion of the map, which is very typical for Fisherman's Bay. We're going to go to this mid-ridge. We've been here for over a minute. We did get, we did have a couple of opportunities for shots. We didn't fire though, as they managed to get into cover, and now we're just going to be waiting for enemies to emerge through the town. We get a nice shot there for 1,294 on that poor tier 8, which is a pretty big low roll, and it can be very frustrating with these low rolls. The high rolls are brilliant, but the low rolls can be very annoying indeed, especially if you are using the higher penetration but lower alpha damage version of the Hesh. We're now going to stick around in this position because it looks like some of the tanks are going to make their way through the side of this town, and we get a nice juicy shot there on that French heavy as he made his way through that gap, and we're just shy of 3k damage with 2 shots done, and we still have all of our hit points intact, and we're only 3 minutes into the battle. Sorry about that, my throat is going. Not used to doing all of this talking, although I'm sure my girlfriend will say otherwise. Now we're just going to be waiting in this position, waiting for these ambush opportunities and the tanks that are trying to cross this gap. This tortoise is just annoyingly below this ridge, so instead we are going to turn our attentions to this enemy Centurion AVRE. We are going to try and get a shot and maybe just track him in place there for our teammates. And whilst he is tracked in place behind that hard cover, we're going to just fall back a couple of ridge lines. We don't want to get caught out in position. And it does take you a little bit of time to get going. It takes you a little bit of time with your mobility to get out of harm's way or to get to where you need to be. So you definitely have to think about your map positioning, where you want to go and where you want to set up. But I feel pretty comfortable in this location at the moment. I'm able to get a little bit of view range out, not as much as if I would have boosted my view range up, but it's enough to be able to spot tanks when they get to the vicinity of our capture circle, and it's just about defending this position. I'm trying to spot for that lowly heavy tank situated in C1. I'm trying to get my teammates to fall back and defend the base. We are up by 2 tanks, so as long as I keep this position kind of safe, I make sure I get some damage here at tanks that are advancing. We try and go for the cupola, which is the weakest spot of that tortoise that I could shoot at in that position, which means that we're going to deal the greatest amount of splash damage. We have blocked 960, showing you the armour can work occasionally thanks to this Centurion turret. And now we're just going to get out of dodge. We can outrun a tortoise even with the poor mobility. And now we're going to get into the centre, see if we can get some side shots at tanks that are defending their own capture circle. And it's just about setting these little traps through these little gaps and trying to take out the enemy tanks. And definitely should write a tank related poem, but maybe that's for a different video. You just want to find these little bits of opportunity to get your damage on, ambush them, and make sure you have hard cover or enemy teammates to support you, because if you don't penetrate or you don't kill that tank you thought you would with the splash damage, you can get caught out in position and it can be very frustrating. And you can see that the snowplow did us a favour there as we blocked some more damage, taken our blocked up to 1920, and we're getting some assistance via spotting these tanks in the middle of the map. But now it's time to zigzag our way out of this position. We are getting shot from towards our base. We're going to get re-stealthed and then hopefully go back in and spot what's in the capture circle. We're still up by those 2 tanks, so there's no massive rush unless one more person gets into our capture circle. For the moment, I'm going to see if I can get a shot on what our friendly tanks are spotting, who are situated in A1 and A2. We try and fire a blind shot there, but it completely goes up in the air. That's what happens sometimes with the nature of these derp guns. It can be frustrating, and with this long reload, it can cost you a lot in the game, and it's about time that I get going in this game. But I'm going to wait for one more shot, hopefully get a penetrating shot into the back of this WZ-111 Kulin. We don't, but we managed to do a nice amount of splash damage there, above 600 splash on a tier 10 premium Chinese heavy tank, which is very nice indeed. And now I'm going to have to make the push forward, and it was at this moment I thought I screwed up. Cue the meme. And I thought I wasn't going to get there in time. Of course, with Hesh, surely I should be able to reset. If I can just get vision on the enemy tank, then I'm going to be able to reset. We saw where he's fired from. He is there. We're going to turn to the side, get our gun depression, aim in for as long as I feel I can. And we don't do any splash damage at all, and that's because we hit the gun of that AMX M451, I believe, or it wasn't enough penetration. And I'm just begging my teammates to get the reset on the capture circle there. Thankfully, the IS-4 isn't a noob like me and manages to penetrate there, taking out that French heavy tank and saving the game for us. And now it's just 2 enemy tanks left. It's a medium tank, and I believe it's also a Death Star. And we are spotted. This is where having poor view range, like the setup that I have, does cost you sometimes, and we're just going to try and weave our way in and out of these buildings, trying to stop ourselves getting shot. But we notice the AVRE did fire there, so we can pull back out, aim in and get a shot into the back of him. But unfortunately we don't penetrate. It might have been the front that we were looking at. I didn't probably wait around long enough to tell. We splashed him to within an inch of his life, and now we should be able to head into the town. We do have full hit points, so I can take a shot from either the Death Star or the Centurion AVRE, depending on whether they ammo rack me or set me on fire. That would be a different story, but if I really need to, I can take a shot and then advance forward. And I'm just trying to get our friendly tanks to push forward now. We outnumber them by over 2 to 1. We can just all go in at once, and even if one of us gets taken out, it doesn't really matter. It allows us to take the victory down. We're not going to have to wait here for absolutely ages. But we poke around that corner, and with our poor view range and the fact that the enemy tank is hidden behind bushes and all the foliage at the end of this corridor, means that we're going to have to try and find a sneakier way to get down this alleyway. And it doesn't help that our driver is dead. We poke again, get spotted, and flag up, let my teammates know that there's a tank in the town, and there's not too much that I can do in this scenario. I've lost enough hit points now that I can get penetrated and taken out by the Death Star or the enemy medium tank, which I believe is the Centurion AVRE. So we're just going to have to hold tight, see if we can hold this position, wait for our teammates to advance through their capture circle, and it's just a little bit of cat and mouse. I was trying to get the enemy AVRE to fire by poking my plow out at the front, take a bit of splash, then advance. And as soon as I know that he is fired or I'm able to advance, I will. We saw the shell go past us there, so now's our chance. With our dead driver as well and the poor mobility of this tank, we're going to trudge into position, try and get into the cover of the building in front of us, and then hopefully come up behind one of these tanks. I try and stop him. I was thinking about getting a quick snapshot on that enemy Centurion, because a splash now anywhere on that tank would kill him. We're just going to have to be a little bit careful. I'm willing now to take the shot. The Death Star's taken out by our friendly artillery, so I'm just going to plow around this corner with the plow, go side on, and just hope that we manage to take him out with the splash. And of course it doesn't do enough damage, as we just hit the front of the tracks and towards the plow, and most of our damage gets absorbed, showing you just how good that plow can come in handy. But the Centurion AVRE on the enemy team feels sorry for me and feels like feeding me a nice ram kill to finish that game, where we don't even finish on the podium for dealing 5.3k damage and dealing 697 assistance. That's only 1,276 XP, a little bit of a profit with 1 kill, 2.3k block, showing you that it is a very, very useful tank. It has that great firepower, poor mobility, not great penetration, but in the right circumstance, this is deadly and very, very broken indeed, so definitely watch out for them on the battlefield. But we do have 2 victories to finish off this video, so thank you all so much for watching. I hope that it helped you maybe think of a different way to set this vehicle up, or I've given you some information that you didn't already know about this tank. Let me know in the comments if you did, and thank you all once again for your patience whilst I was off. The content will now be coming out hopefully as quickly as I can get it out. But until then, I hope you're all enjoying the new season. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.